Business. Welcome everybody to the Ides of February, the 15th of February. This is the Senate Democratic Caucus. I'm Allison Clarkson and have the privilege of serving as the majority leader in the Senate. And today is our whip's birthday, Senator Hooker's birthday. And so we have applauded her already on the floor, but we continue to celebrate her all day. Today, we're going to return to the important updates of our committees, but we're going to start with two big, sort of more fulsome updates. We're going to start with Senator Bray, who's the chair of Senate Natural Resources and Energy, and we're going to talk about Act 250. And then we're going to go to Senator Lyons, who is going to update us on the huge issues involving mental health. And then we'll go to our committee updates, beginning with agriculture. So Senator Bray, the floor is yours.
And thank you, Madam Majority Leader. So I'll give you updates on the Act 250 bill we'll be voting out is S234. Senator McCormick also had a bill in committee, and it turns out that actually the original 234 and 200, we didn't find much in the way of takers for those proposals, and we're continuing to work to craft a bill that supports smart growth and development with a particular focus on supporting housing, and a particular focus within that to support priority housing projects, and which are relieved from going through Act 250. We're responding in part to the pressures of ARPA funding, in which all those dollars have to be committed. They have to be obligated by the end of 2024 and spent by the end of 2026. And while those are reasonably far off for some projects, when you get to an entire housing project, that is not actually a lot of time to go from start to finish. So we're mindful of that. No one wants to see money reverting to federal government for a failure to be able to implement. So we're focused on the housing within development piece. And then we're also saying at the same time, we've given short shrift to the green spaces outside these more developed areas. I mean, the other side of smart development is keeping the green spaces green. And so we're looking at improving how we manage forests and forest blocks and habitat outside the developed areas. And it's a balancing act, always is on Act 250. We're aiming to vote a bill out this week. Maybe it takes an extra day, I don't know. But there are different provisions being offered, and we're in that process. Everyone here knows of what's in, what's out, what strikes folks as a balance. And also we want to preserve, if we do something that helps ARPA funded housing, we don't want that to perversely disadvantage the incentive to do priority housing projects, which are relieved from Act 250. If suddenly all housing in designated areas were relieved from Act 250, we might see less priority housing projects. And those are the ones that have an affordability component in them. So we don't want Act 250 to become have an unintended consequence on affecting the availability of housing for a particular group. We would like to see good housing for everyone supported with no unintended consequences. So that's Act 250. And then the other bill is S148, the Environmental Justice Bill. We continue to have back and forth. We're in the process. We're up to we'll be up to our fourth draft. But as usual, there's parties, and they've actually been working well together outside of committee time as well as with the committee. So we're making good progress with each draft. And I think by the end of this week, we'll have an environmental justice bill ready to vote out. We'll see how that goes. They have raised, the environmental justice bill, I'll just flag, has raised an interesting issue. This came up last through the Vermont Climate Council. And that is when we ask a traditionally sort of disadvantaged community to become advisors and participate in a process. And they actually have a lot of work to do outside of the days that they formally meet. And it can be challenging for them to do that work because they literally may have family obligations or 2 or 3 jobs. So there's a discussion around and a recommendation, I think, from the Climate Council experience that when you're talking about environmental justice populations, you might consider giving them a stipend so that it becomes one of their jobs is doing the work of the council. And I think that will be, it's, I want to acknowledge there's some controversy there because we rely a lot on many boards and councils for people to volunteer. Is that, we don't want to be pitting one group against another or really comparing one group against another. Practically speaking, there are people who historically have trouble because of the financial demands of making a living in participating in a meaningful way. And that was a lesson learned, I think, the hard way by the Climate Council. And one of the recommendations that we heard that would carry over to this Environmental Justice Advisory Committee. So we don't know the answer to that, but I just wanted to offer it to the caucus as something that I think we'll end up talking about, not just for this bill, but more broadly in the months or years to come. Thanks. That's my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Caucus members, do you have any questions for Senator Bray at this point? Yes, Jeanette.
This isn't a question, but it's a comment when talking about the per diems that people are paid. There's just this paltry $50 per diem in the legislation, and the boards and commissions this summer dealt with that, and we have a recommendation. And our recommendation is that the appointing body, I don't know if this will pass or not, but the appointing body, whoever that is, if it's that sets up the board or panel or commission or task force or whatever you want to call it, puts into their budget. They know which groups, which boards have a lot of responsibility and which just meet twice a year and don't really do anything anyway. And have them put it in their budget, and it'll go through the budget process, and then they decide how much to pay the community members on their panels.
Right. Well, I would, so that's interesting. I'm glad to know that you're thinking about it. It's definitely a sensitive issue. We live in a culture where one of the ways we tell people we respect them is we pay them for their work. And so when people are already struggling financially and we ask for a large donation of work on top of it, it can come across, even though not intended, as disrespectful in a way. So, it's again, I'm sharing this as something that's very much live and we're thinking about. I'm glad to know that others are too, and
yes, well,
figure it out.
Thank you. Any other questions of Senator Bray? Shout out if you have it, because I don't see any hands. So let me know. Okay. Thank you, Chris. That was great. Ginny, Senator Lyons, before we go to committee updates, we're going to hear from Senator Lyons about some of the bills and issues around mental health.
Thank you, Senator Clarkson. Obviously, we're all aware of the terrific problem that we have in our emergency departments around mental health and folks who go into the emergency department seeking help and then stay there for long periods of time, just waiting for care. Our committee has 3 bills right now that we're working on related to mental health care. I'm going to speak very briefly to all 3, and then I'm going to ask Senator Hooker, who is also co-lead sponsor with me, to speak to those bills as well. We're currently looking at 2 bills for adult respite support, and those 2 bills are probably going to be put together into a single bill. the first bill, the bill to go all together will begin to look at both workforce issues that we know are so compelling in our mental health world, as well as other areas of healthcare. And then we'll also be looking at some access issues, trying to help people stay out of the ED and to have support at local community respite programs. So the bills together will provide for the development of respite centers where peers will provide support for people with mental health issues. But perhaps it's someone who is in need of care and support for a short period of time. And as we've learned about our respite centers, it's really a 2 to 5 day stay at the very most, and then they go back home. So what we're hoping is that this will become an alternative, first, to going to an emergency department, but secondly, an alternative to the care that people can receive in the community. We know that our DAs are our designated agencies are terrifically overwhelmed at this time as well and understaffed. So this would help in that department as well. There are 2 respite centers currently in the state. One is called Alyssum in the central Vermont area. The other is the Pathways program that's in Burlington, Vermont. And I'm going to turn it over to Senator Hooker in a minute and let her talk more fully about the certification piece that will be in the bill. I do want to mention S-197, which is a bill that initially has come to us as a result of looking at all the crisis response opportunities in the state. And there are a significant number of mental health crisis response programs. So one of those might be through the Department of Public Safety, to have a mental health worker in the Department of Public Safety. Another might be the mobile response group. Another might be a local community devising a plan for social workers to support a response to mental health crises. So rather than continue work with a working group, our committee has been looking at children's mental health issues. So S-197, I think ultimately, and it depends a bit on what our committee decides, but ultimately we're looking at how to improve the system of care for children who have mental health needs. Our schools are absolutely overwhelmed. This started before the pandemic, where kids have mental health needs that go beyond the capacity of school counselors and others to support. So we are looking at certification programs for peer support for our kids. We are working with our Committee on Education. I see Senator Campion is here, and he and I are strategizing together, our 2 committees, about how to provide some support, peer support services for kids, and perhaps through the after-school program. So that bill is in development, but we will. I'm sure you'll see both bills, S-197, and then the 2 bills together, 194 and 195. That's a bit of an update. I'm going to turn it over to Senator Hooker, who is the other lead sponsor on the 2 bills, and would look forward to any questions that folks have going forward.
Okay.
Thanks, Senator Lyons. As Senator Lyons said, the Peer Respite Center is a program where people can choose to go as opposed to going to emergency rooms and ending up staying there for long periods of time because there are no step-down beds, as we might call them. They're run by individuals with lived experience of recovery from mental health challenges, and they help guests to better understand what's happened that's caused their crisis and how to resolve the issues that led to the crisis, and knowledge and skills and accessible community resources that can help people in the future in times of distress. Many states have these, including our neighboring states, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and New York. And they are substantially less expensive than staying at the ER, as you can imagine, or in psychiatric beds at the hospitals. The peer certification process is something that we're looking at primarily because although there are peer workers in Vermont currently, there are no standards of experience and training and no competency standards, no ethical standards. These are the types of things that we want to formalize really so that there's a standard across the state. The peer respite centers would be located in, well, we're starting with 7 counties. I know Senator Hardy is looking for something in Addison County because it's first on the list of counties alphabetically. But we're hoping that eventually this will be something all over the state. So we want to make sure that the people who are already, many people are already doing this work. We just want to make sure that every center has the same standards, that every center is giving the best that they can to the people who need these services. So those 2 companion bills we hope will have your support as they go through, and we'll continue to talk about them in our committee. Thank you.
Right. Senator Kitchell.
I want to make colleagues aware of the funding proposal for our designated agencies in the governor's budget. A lot of what we're talking about is reflective of assistance under stress. And it's also one where the funding has been minimal at best, whatever the legislature could scrape together. So the budget as proposed by the governor has a 3% increase to the DAs and the SSAs and to the providers of long-term care services, which would be our VNAs, Office on Aging, et cetera. In this workforce environment and the cost, just to give you some idea of comparability, the cost for the salary and benefit increases, and this would be pay and healthcare and so forth, not the retirement, which is a separate line item, is over 10%. So we're asking these community-based organizations to provide an acceptable level of service at a 3% increase. And that is to cover everything: salaries, benefits, increased operating costs, food for the residential facilities. And you can see what it does to an already underfunded system. So I, certainly appreciate the work of what Health and Welfare is doing and looking at other ways to support individuals with mental illness. But it is juxtaposed to a budget request that continues a very inadequate level of funding. And you can say, oh, well, we would like, and then combined with that, of course, are the tax expenditures, which are foregone revenues to build the budget. So I'm only letting you know because you're going to be getting a huge, I imagine, amount of correspondence from families, from employees, from the agencies relative to the funding that has been recommended. And in building the budget, it's got to be balanced. The House has passed a child tax credit. And so that's about a $50 million cost or revenue tax expenditure. So the constraints under which we are operating to do more than a 3% are very challenging. And I'm just stating it up front that this is going to be the environment in which we're trying to address the level of support. We know from the public hearings around the state that housing, mental health, childcare were right up there at the top. But a 3% base increase in this environment is really going to end up with less funding in an area where people are saying it's needed the most. So I realize I'm a little bit off topic, but if you don't have a good solid foundation to build on, this is creating some serious concerns, which I'm sure you're hearing about, whether it's your VNA, whether it's your adult days, et cetera. So that's all I have to offer at this point.
Senator Kitchell, you, as you well know, we are, you and I have talked, and I think others are also, especially in our committee, extremely aware of the costs associated with some of our health and welfare needs in the state. Obviously, mental health has risen to the top with this one. And so as we make our proposal and pass it out of committee, we have no doubt we'll have a fiscal note that travels along. And as we complete our work on various areas of welfare and various areas of healthcare, we obviously are going to have to prioritize and work with appropriations to make the very decisions that you are addressing. And it's really hard to imagine 3% when the past under-resourced activities have been going on. All of our DAs have been under resourced. It's so difficult. So we'll just to let folks know that we are fully cognizant of the appropriations issue that travels along with many of our bills.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for all aspects of that. Any questions for Senator Lyons, Kitchell, or Hardy before we move to agriculture update? Okay, I don't see any. So yell out if you have one. Chris, Senator Pearson.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm trying to decipher all of those reports and what would we imagine subject to available funding. I guess I heard Senator Hooker talk about sort of some system improvements to enable workforce in schools, but what would we tell our schools? Like, would we imagine more money going specifically for that? Or are we hoping that the process you've described around peer support will go quickly? I'm curious to just have as much concrete answer as possible.
So on the school question, is what I talked about. Senator Hooker was talking about adult peer support in the community. And so the other bill that we are currently working on will provide some peer support certification for folks, perhaps in the after-school program or other programs that are community-based that can support kids. That bill is still being drafted, and the funding, we're hoping, will be from a federal source and will not put a dent in the state revenue. So that's ongoing. The other bills that Senator Hooker was talking about are really the community-based support services. Both are important to the system. One at the kid level, children's level, and the other, more importantly, at folks with mental illness who need some time out and not have to go to the emergency room and not have acute care needs. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
And
think
if
so.
I could just address the workforce issue, Senator Pearson, that I think you were also alluding to, the peer support and the peer certification is directed at that. I mean, these people are already involved. They already have expertise, and the certification would just be to kind of formalize the standards that are required for people to work in those areas.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. And anything else before we move to Senator Starr and agriculture? Oh, Senator White.
I just wanted to make a comment. I think that last year there was scholarship money for from the Appropriations Committee and probably Health and Welfare for mental health counselors. And I just had a note from a constituent who wanted to get her master's in that and had been putting it off for 3 years because she couldn't afford it, and she's just started her master's degree, so she's very thankful.
It was $1.5 million.
But it's making a huge difference in people's lives. It's really terrific.
Right. Anything else? Okay, then I am going to go to Senator Starr with agriculture for a brief update, because sadly we only have about 20 minutes left. So we have. You're muted, I think, Bobby.
Yeah, thank you. And I haven't got too long a report. The dairy marketing program bill that we put together and passed through to appropriations because of the deadline, and our farmers signing up for that program was very short. And so that bill, it's a pretty good bill. Last year, it's a federal program that they can sign up for, and it's 15 cents per hundredweight. And last year, that returned about $1.57 per hundredweight to our dairy guys. So it was like a 10-to-1 return on that money. But still, a lot of the farmers didn't sign up. They didn't feel they could afford to lose the 15 cents up front. And so we did put a bill together where that would be offset by us, the premium payment on that insurance policy. And we passed that in the BAA. S-188, I don't know how much you want to get into the details. It's dealing with the small farm cannabis growers, and we voted that out last Friday, I believe, which has gone to our House Finance or Senate Finance Committee. And then it'll go to approps, I believe, after that. I don't know, Chris, did you want to explain that in any length about allowing the small growers some exemptions? Or
Well, just the snapshot is trying to make this an appealing diversification strategy for particular dairy and other farmers. This is in so doing, trying to make it as consistent as possible. So in other words, if you're growing any other crop, you have all sorts of protections and benefits under Vermont law. If you're starting to grow cannabis, it would be uncomfortable to suddenly have local zoning and stuff applied to 1,000 square feet of your land. This just extends those basic outlines for the very smallest outdoor producers only. We're not keeping zoning off of big indoor warehouse grow facilities and warehouses or anything like that. Just when you're outdoor in the very smallest. So it's a baby step in that direction to consider this crop farming. Basically, we didn't go straight up farming because there's all sorts of federal implications for the Agency of Ag, et cetera, et cetera. It's one of those more complicated than you would think, but this is a baby step in the right direction to try to pull current farmers in to the cannabis economy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. And we are and have been and are still working on the on-farm slaughter stuff that we thought we had all squared away last year that allows on-farm slaughter. And we've run into some over the summer and this fall ran into some snags with the federal meat marketing people in DC. And so we're working through that and expect to have some corrective language in the near future. And this week, Friday, we have a joint meeting with Senator Sears and his committee in regards to the right to farm bill. So we usually keep busy our few hours a day that we have to spend together, and things are going relatively well, I would say.
Great.
Thank you.
we're delighted to know that, Senator Starr. Senator Kitchell, Chair of Appropriations.
The budget adjustment, we got our usual Dear Jane letter as to where we had failed to please the governor, not unexpectedly. And there will be a budget, the committee of conference to work out the differences. If there's anything that seems to be, I just want to let you know, we anticipate making changes around our retention and recruitment provisions. We had a year. We're hearing that's a little hard to administer. So there will be some changes. But I do think, just to let you know, this is to deal with providers based on need, and it's for recruitment and retention. It is not a hazard pay worker benefit. And I think people are kind of conflating the two. So I just need to be very clear. The intent is to help get vacancies filled and keep workers employed in key areas. So that's at least one of the areas that I know we'll be having to make, have some discussion, but we know that there will be a committee of conference.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Senator Kitchell? Okay. Oh, nope. Great. Thank you. I think our next up is Senator Sorotkin with Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Allison. It says mute here, but you can hear me, right?
Yep, you're fine.
So we continue to work on two very large bills, an omnibus housing bill and an omnibus economic development bill. The administration has hundreds of millions of dollars in their proposal for each. We're not just talking about redirecting some of that money, but we're also talking about policy, especially on housing. Similar to what Senator Bray said, there are many things we can do in the policy sphere that could make housing move faster, make it less costly, and we need to look at those things as well as spending subsidy dollars on housing. We continue to struggle on economic development. I would say, even though the administration is getting better, they present us with very ill-defined programs that are very flexible in their hands, spending $100 million without anywhere the kind of due diligence or structural guardrails that would normally happen when you establish a new program through the legislature. So we're trying to find ways to tighten that ship. There was, I don't know if some of you read an article in New York Times recently where really blasted the PPP program of all the billions of dollars given out to businesses there that were not directed towards what was intended, like deferred maintenance and payroll and things like that, and sometimes wound up in the bottom line of the business community and owners as opposed to their intended need. So we're trying to figure out how to do it. It's a tough nut to crack. There's a couple of worker-related issues that we see as very much economic recovery, like the unemployment bill that passed last year. They have no money in for that, whereas they have all the money in for business. We're talking about raising the minimum wage, but not really for the purpose of raising the wage, because everybody's paying that already, but to preserve the importance of the inflationary factor in our minimum wage law. If we don't raise up to what people are paying now, then when inflation comes along in every year, that inflation factor will be worthless. We're also looking at, we're always trying to play catch up in the COVID area, but there are a lot of people out there who are suffering because they have to take care of their kids, miss work, have sick days that are not reimbursed, and they have no income replacement at all. So the average Vermonter is hurting every much as big as the hundreds of millions that the governor is suggesting for the business community. So we're trying to find the sweet spot and a balance, and those two bills will be coming out, and they're big bills, and they cover the waterfront on both economic development and housing.
Great, thank you, Michael. Any questions for Senator Sirotkin?
Yeah,
Great, go for it.
Michael, I'm just trying to figure out where the sports betting bill is. New York is making millions upon millions. They just opened. Massachusetts is looking at $500 million in revenue
Right.
from sports betting.
I'm glad you asked that question, Senator. We were due a report November 15th, and the drafter of the report said, could he have a few more days? And here we are in the middle of February. We still don't have the report. And we brought him in, and he gave a preview of the report. I have to say, I walked away somewhat dizzy of all the complicated choices that were involved. I haven't given up on it, but we don't have much time. Maybe we could tack it on after crossover. If I had to guess at this point to do it justice, as you know, Senator, you and I are champions of this thing. I totally agree. I was on the radio talking about it yesterday or Saturday or Sunday, Super Bowl day. I think the mini step that would happen here would be really a blue ribbon legislative panel directing to come back with a report. There's so many choices that need to be made in this. And I look at marijuana and those things, and I think there's more money than the administration has said is there. I think we should do it, but it's going to be hard. Maybe there'll be an opening after crossover that I could tack it on another bill, but I don't think we can get to before crossover.
Yeah, the governor has $2 million in revenue in his FY23 budget from sports gambling. So I guess he expected a bill to be passed and in law by now.
Yeah.
I don't know who the blue ribbon, who that group is, but I think it's just, we're sitting, constant ads from New York in the Bennington market for sports betting. And you have to drive 8 miles to participate in New York's,
Right.
For me anyway. But,
And it's 33 states have now done it.
yeah.
So
Thank you. Yes, we all heard about it on Sunday from a variety of sources. Thank you. Any other questions for Michael? Okay, Senator Campion with Educations.
Thanks, Allison. Senate Education will likely pass out a miscellaneous education bill this week, which has 7 or 8 items that we've been working on put in it, as well as some things that I believe will be helpful to the Agency of Education. Senators know that we've been working to find a line or thread a needle on the church-state issues, which we are finalizing also this week. We also have a bill coming out that hopefully will push our school districts in a good direction with regard to making certain that their mascots are not discriminatory, etc. We have taken some testimony on the upcoming teacher. Well, we have a teacher shortage crisis now, but as anyone who is picking up the paper knows, it is going to just get worse throughout the country, and we are working to play a role in buffering that hit here in Vermont. We heard some testimony last week on PCBs. Senators will recall our testing bill last year, and so we got an update from the Agency of Ed, but we have Dr. Levine coming in this week to talk to us more about PCB testing. We also have Dr. Levine coming in to talk about vaccinations in schools, what it would look like, the possibilities, his thoughts on mandating COVID vaccines for kids returning to school in the fall, as well as general questions about vaccinations. And I think he's coming in Wednesday or Thursday. I'm sure we'll also hear during that time an update on COVID generally. Let's see, Senator Lyons mentioned our shared work and social emotional health of children. I think that hits the highlights. We are working on a recommendation finally on categorical, weightings, a hybrid method, a hybrid solution to early English language learners as it relates to funding. And we will likely send a letter to finance sometime in the middle of this week that we're going to take some testimony on and work a little bit on today. So that's it.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, sadly, we are going to end with a report from finance, from Senator Cummings and finance, and we will next week have updates from everybody else who we didn't get to today. And I would urge the public to go to their agendas. There's lots of important work happening in all our committees. And I would use the legislative website to know what is current and what is being taken up and voted on this week. Senator Cummings.
Yes. Finance has two major bills we've been working on. One is the school weighting. And we've been waiting for a recommendation from Ed on English as a second language. And as Senator Campion just said, I understand that's coming. We're going through trying to work out a transition so that schools the ones that are going to take a loss won't take it all at once. And we've got a couple other technical things we're working out. The other one we're working on is a change in the corporate income tax structure. It would take an hour to explain sales only, but it basically would move us in the direction that a lot of the country is going and how we apportion income from multi-state, multinational corporations. And it has a hefty increase in the minimum corporate tax, which the vast majority of corporations pay. That is opposed by the administration. We had a simple little bill on how you appraise timeshare condos. Timeshares can't be sold right now, and they're being bought up for next to nothing by new corporations that are using them as part of a point system, stay here, get points. But there's been a series of appeals, and the result is Cambridge, for one, lost $5.2 million in its grand list. And so we are trying to come up with a way that fairly assesses the value of timeshares as they're transitioning out of traditional timeshares into this other new kind of economic structure. We have a bill on the use of genetic information in insurance, which I think will get out this week. And I'm looking at us. That's the bulk of what we're going to do. And then we will start taking a look at some of the income-based education funding proposals.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. We have run out of time. I wish you well this afternoon in committee. And thank you. That was terrific. Much appreciated. Have a lovely rest of the day. And happy birthday again to